Hey DIYers, what's up? Mike Boards with the Mike Boards channel. Thank you for watching. We're talking Mercruiser, Outdrive, or stern engines. And in the event that your engine or stern is not trimming up, we're going to talk about some common causes. Let's take a look. All right, DIYers, in the garage now, and in front of us is my grandma's 1989 Glassport speedboat. And it has a 3.0 Mercruiser inboard engine. And on the back, it has an Alpha 1 Gen 1 Outdrive. And we are going to again talk about the common causes that lead to an outdrive not trimming up or down. Let's get to it. Here we are inside the boat and to a closer top view of our 3.0 liter Mercruiser inboard engine. DIYers, we've done a lot of work to this, and we're going to post helpful video links down below in the comment section as well as the description section. We have replaced the ignition coil, which is right there. We have replaced the distributor cap and all the internal parts, as well as the spark plug wires and all of the plugs and more. However, common cause number one, is your battery connected? And if it is it charged? Check the voltage. It should be over 12 volts. And if it's not, go ahead and charge it. And DIYers, I will be honest, if your battery is older than 5 years, replace it. Chances are if you charge it, it is not going to hold a charge. So again, if it's older than 5 years, do yourself a favor, get a brand new battery. But if it's newer, just charge it. That could be your cause. Because your outdrive, believe it or not, requires quite a lot of power and voltage to be raised and lowered. Taking a step back, what we'll do is we will hop to the port side, rear portion of our speedboat, and we're going to talk about the hydraulic pump and reservoir and solenoids. At this point, a close-up view of our entire hydraulic system. The motor, the reservoir, the hydraulic lines feeding out of this system, as well as all the electrical wiring that feed into their respective solenoids. And again, a likely cause of why your outdrive is not trimming up or down, you may actually have low fluid in your reservoir. And for our exact serial number service manual, this is the fluid that our service manual recommends using. It is Quicksilver Marine Lubricants, Power Trim, and Steering Fluid. And down below in the comment section, as well as the description section, will be a link on where to purchase that. However, back to the fluid and reservoir, take a good look at the actual reservoir itself. You have a min line and a max line. And DIYers, in the event that you are below the min line, fluid-wise, it may be as simple as just adding some power trim and steering fluid to your reservoir. And if that's the case, I don't recommend filling it all the way to the max. I recommend filling it to the position directly between the min line and max line. And I say that because in the event that you add fluid and your outdrive is still not trimming up and down as you want it to, you might have air in your system, and that will require you to bleed your system. And by having too much fluid during the bleeding process, that could actually work against you. However, for your convenience, we will have that link scrolling above right now as well as down below. And that is how to properly and safely bleed all the air out of your hydraulic system and your trim rams, as well as your hydraulic lines feeding into your trim rams. So again, that is a likely cause. And since we're right here, let's direct our attention over to this side where we have two electrical solenoids or trim solenoids. And behind this little plate right here, it's just a plastic cover, are again two solenoids. And you got a bunch of electrical wiring feeding into each of them. And in the event that your outdrive is trimming up, but it's not trimming down, or it's trimming down, but it's not trimming up, however, if you push on the trailer push button, it comes up, well, chances are you have a faulty solenoid. And replacing just one isn't really recommended. It's kind of like spark plugs. If you're going to replace one, replace them all, right? So with that said, in the event that you have a faulty solenoid, go ahead and replace both of them. And we have a link on how to do that also below. Check that out. In addition, inside this little casing here, you have a fuse. Go ahead and carefully pull that out of the clip or mount and separate the two halves and check the fuse. If it's burnt out or blown, replace it. So again, our hydraulic system and the common causes of the hydraulic system that can lead to your outdrive not trimming up or down. And from here, that's all we want to talk about inside the boat. Let's make our way out of the boat and to the back where the outdrive is. We have stepped out of the boat to the back where the transom, gimbal ring, bell housing, and outdrive is. And I'm going to position the camera and talk about the next likely cause. Camera is now positioned again. We are looking at the Alpha 1 Gen 1 outdrive, the bell housing, gimbal ring, and transom, as well as our trim rams and hydraulic lines. And let's direct our attention all the way to the lower portion of the transom where the transom and bell housing anode is. And between the anode and hard mount of the lower transom is where your hard fittings of the lines feed into and is secured to. And check for leaks at that location, both on the starboard side shown here and the port side. And if you've got hydraulic fluid leaking out of those fittings, go ahead and carefully tighten those fittings without over tightening, because if you have a leak at those fittings, the strength of the hydraulic fluid moving through the lines and pushing these rams out and back in will be degraded. So take a look at that, as well as the fittings here, and coming underneath you've got that long line that feeds to the fitting up top right here. Again, check for leaks, and on top of that, we have brand new installed lines or hoses, and we did that just recently when we replaced our trim rams because ours were extremely old, 30 years old. They were brittle and they were hard as rock. So again, we replaced them. And since we're talking about the hoses, take a look at your hoses. Not only is it possible to have a leak at the fitting, it's possible to have a leak at your hose. And again, in our case, ours was 30 years old and hard as rock. So it was only a matter of time before one of our hoses gave way and started leaking. However, I will be honest, that is more of an unlikely cause, but we definitely can't rule it out as a cause or option. And again, the trim ram, both starboard and port side, are brand new. In our case, we will have links down below on how to replace your trim ram and hydraulic lines. And take a look at this section right here. You have seals that your ram or piston feeds into the case. And in the event that you have hydraulic fluid leaking out of this section right here, well, that will do the exact same thing as if it was leaking out down here. It's going to degrade the power and efficient flow of the hydraulic fluid internally, and it's not going to allow you to trim your outdrive as good as it would allow you if there was no leak. So definitely check again, starboard and port side trim rams and this section right here to ensure there are no hydraulic fluid leaking out of the seals. So again, trim ram, hydraulic hoses, and their respective fittings. And from here, again, we are starboard. I'm going to carefully shift the outdrive to the port side. And from here, we now have access to our trim sender switch. Again, it says starboard on it. This is our trim sender switch. And during the entire bellows rebuild and gimbal housing rebuild, we removed our old and damaged trim sender and trim limit switches and installed brand new switches and wiring. And what a benefit that was. If you were able to see those videos, you saw that our trim sender wasn't bad, but it was aged. However, our trim limit on the port side was completely ripped. I'm talking wiring. Completely ripped, making it literally impossible to trim the outdrive up unless we used the trailer push button. And DIYers, I'll be honest, that's not how we want to operate on the water on a daily basis, so we wanted to get that fixed. So take a good look at your trim sender switch, the wiring, make sure it is secured and calibrated and aligned. We also have a link down below that will walk you through on how to calibrate and adjust your trim sender and trim limit switch in the event that you replace it, or do any heavy maintenance to your outdrive and bell housing. And also take a look at the electrical wiring feeding inward toward the transom and through the hull. Check its overall condition. Do you see any crimps in the wires? Do you see any open wires where corrosion is beginning to build or grow? Are there any portions of your electrical wires that look like they've been overheated and melted, which could be caused by a short, which you definitely don't want when you're inside the water operating your outdrive and boat? So take a look at that. If you see any of that, replace your trim sender and trim limit switches. And from here on the port side, again, our trim limit switch, our wiring right in here was completely disconnected and ripped. And again, making it impossible to trim our outdrive up. Hopefully that's not your cause, but it's possible. So definitely take a look at that. And with that said, I'm not going to go to the port side. You kind of get a good understanding of the trim limit and trim sender switches by looking at it on starboard. Let's hop back inside the boat where I can then show you where the electrical wires that feed off the trim switches out here on the gimbal ring and into the inboard engine, because it might be possible that your electrical connections internally or inboard could be the cause, whether they're loose or they're corroded or damaged. Here we are back inside the boat, and we are looking at, again, our hydraulic system and motor, reservoir, lines, and electrical wiring and solenoids. And coming up to this section right here, I'll scroll the camera in here shortly. These are the electrical connections that our trim limit switch secures into. And let me scroll in and give you a better view. And it's a bit tough to see them, but I've got it all zip tied and secured to alleviate damage. And these are what's called bullet electrical connections, and we've got two of them. Again, that is the electrical wiring and connections that feed all the way out to our trim limit switch, which is port side. And double check those connections and the electrical wiring within close proximity of those connections. Double check that nothing is melted, frayed, damaged, or anything. And if it is, that will need to be replaced. Now let's head to starboard side. Coming over starboard side of our inboard engine, and in relation to where I'm going to show you the electrical connections and wires, we have our ignition coil there, distributor cap, fuel pump down below, as well as oil pump. And I'll position the camera and scroll in a little bit, and we have a starter solenoid here which really has no relation to our trim. However, directly above it, you have a block that is secured to a hard plate, and you've got several electrical wires feeding off of that block. And in regards to your trim sender switch, which is again starboard side out at the outdrive and transom and secured to the gimbal ring, the electrical wire feeds through the hull and upstream to this section right here and is secured in place by those 2 screws. And DIYers, same thing as the port side with the hydraulic system. Double check your electrical wiring, double check your connections, double check your screws. Look for any signs of damage such as overheated wires, melted wires, frayed wires, exposed wires, corroded wires, etc. And if you see any of that, go ahead and get that replaced. Now, in addition, you notice the screw itself on the lower connection block is a bit rusted. Something as little as that could actually cause your outdrive to not be able to trim up and down efficiently as designed. So take a look at that. Again, it could be that simple, no joke. Scroll back out. Again, in relation to where the trim sender electrical wiring and connections starboard side are positioned and secured to. Here we are back to the outdrive, and DIYers, that's it. Again, the common causes that lead to an outdrive not trimming up or down as designed. And before we wrap the video up, I do want to talk about the trim motor and sound of the motor. In the event that you are attempting to trim your outdrive down or up, take a minute and really focus in on the sound of your hydraulic motor and try to hear or get a feel of the motor sound itself. Does it sound like it's winding basically freely and the outdrive is not moving? If that's your case, that is a definite indication that you have air inside the system. Again, your hydraulic lines and your trim rams. And if you have just undergone some substantial maintenance to your outdrive that includes hydraulic line replacement and trim ram replacement, you definitely need to bleed all the air out of your system. And again, down below will be a link on how to do that. Definitely check that out. We really hope it will help you. So again, if your motor sounds like it's free spinning and not really engaged or sounding like it's grabbing a hold of all that hydraulic fluid and making that very unique sound that we all love to hear when the outdrive is trimming up and down, you have air in your system. So I wanted to cover that before I wrap this video up. And DIYers, as always, we hope this helps. Let us know if you have any questions. And from here, do us a favor, below the video, you will see that thumbs up icon. Click on that, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Definitely ring your YouTube bell. That would be very helpful to us. We'd really appreciate it. Thanks again for watching.